Howdy, I'm Rex Hooper, and I love to watch westerns. And if you do too, I've got one I could recommend for you. Fistful of Dollars, released in 1964, directed by Sergio Leone and starring Clint Eastwood. I think if you're interested in westerns, chances are you're interested in history. And here's a little bit of history about the film. It's best, I believe, to always view things within the context of when they were released, to get the full impact of the power of the film itself. Because Fistful of Dollars is a western that changed westerns forever. It was unlike the westerns that came before it, and every western that came after it was changed because of Fistful of Dollars. The film was made in Italy, and at the time, the fascist government had just been brought down from power and democracy was brought to Italy. And one of the things that happened was a huge influx of American culture. And for a lot of the southern working class Italians, the great passion was going to the movies and watching westerns. Well, because they had no TV and no internet, no Instagram, no TikTok, the movies was one of the main sources of entertainment for those working class southern Italians. So they ran out of westerns pretty quickly. So the big movie studios of Italy said they had to make their own ones to try and fill the deficit. Fistful of Dollars is one of the best, truly great examples of what would become known as the spaghetti westerns. As a side note, spaghetti western may be a fairly offensive term, a bit like, oh yeah, those Italians, they eat spaghetti, don't they? Spaghetti westerns. Well, it would be a derogatory term if it weren't for the fact that spaghetti westerns are such a high quality that if now something is described as having the quality of a spaghetti western, that's a compliment. So many of the great westerns that came out of the 60s were Italian westerns or spaghetti westerns. So I apologize if it's offensive to you and you're Italian and you're watching this, but I don't mean it to be offensive. It's just a term that's well established now, spaghetti western, for the Italian westerns, and I think of it as a badge of honor. The story of Fistful of Dollars follows the man with no name, who is actually called Joe, who travels into town on a mule and wearing a Mexican poncho. Where did he come from? Where did he get the poncho? Who is this man? None of these questions are ever answered. Unlike a lot of contemporary movies where things are all explained and explained away, in Fistful of Dollars, the mystery is able to be a mystery, to set in and set the tone of the story. The man with no name travels into town and finds that there are two feuding families vying for control of the town, and he decides to play one off against the other by working for both. It's a great story, and a great story taken from another great movie. A Fistful of Dollars is kind of like a remake, or a rip-off really, of a Japanese classic, Jimbo, by the great Japanese film director Akira Kurosawa. His film Jimbo is not about a cowboy, it's about a samurai, but follows pretty much the exact same story. Apparently, Akira Kurosawa saw Fistful of Dollars, and after he saw it, he said, well, it's a good film, but it's my film. And he sued Sergio Leone and the studio. He received a massive out-of-court settlement because, well, he was deserved it. It was his film. Knowing that it's a rip-off of Jimbo does not diminish from the film itself. they do something interesting with it, with the characters, with the setting. Both films can exist. The world is big enough for both, and both are great. Check out Yo Jimbo. Of course, check out A Fistful of Dollars if you haven't. The Italian studios that were making these westerns deliberately tried to make them sound American. A lot of the producers and directors, composers, and even actors would change their names to have more American-sounding pseudonyms. To make sure that this film was a success, the director Sergio Leone wanted an American star. Well, apparently he asked lots of established American cowboy actors, and they all said no. And the list went down and down and down until eventually he got to Clint Eastwood. Clint Eastwood had been in TV before, and hadn't done many films, if any films, as far as I understand. But he was in a TV show called Rawhide, where he played a good guy cowboy. Sergio Leone didn't really want Clint Eastwood because he didn't want a good guy. He wanted a bad guy. He wanted someone rough around the edges. Story goes as he had his photograph of Clint Eastwood, his the portfolio photo, and he drew on it a stubble, a cigar, and said, yeah, this guy could work.
Move 'em on, hit 'em up, move 'em on, hit 'em up, rawhide.
The music for Fistful of Dollars is one of the greatest film soundtracks of all time, regardless of what John Williams or Hans Zimmer might tell you. It was made by Ennio Morricone, known as the Maestro, one of the greatest film composers ever, and Fistful of Dollars is one of his great works. It was a hit when it was released. It was a record a lot of people bought. And it wasn't even the first choice for the film. Sergio Leone had some other guy that was lined up to do it. The studio convinced him to meet with this kid simply as a lip service. But Sergio was not a man known to change his mind. He'd meet with the kid, but he wasn't going to take his music. That was until he met him. Apparently at this meeting, to ingratiate himself, Ennio Morricone showed Sergio a picture of the two of them as children. Apparently, they knew each other when they were very, very young. But Sergio has no memory of ever meeting him before that day. Apparently, he played him a few different pieces of music, and Sergio was fairly unimpressed, until it came to one track. It was a cover of a Woody Guthrie song that Ennio Morricone had worked on with Peter Tevis, an American singer. He'd given it gone from the Woody Guthrie classic folk ballad to a very cinematic kind of feel. You could check out that link on YouTube to Pastures of Plenty by Peter Tevis and Ennio Morricone. And you'll find, maybe before or after you see Fistful of Dollars, that it's very similar, because it's the same song. Except they took out Peter Tevis's part. They replaced it with a flute. When Sergio Leone heard the track of Peter Tevis and Ennio Morricone's version of Woody Guthrie's folk song, Pastures of Plenty, Sergio said, "That is the sound of my movie." Peter Tevis was, as the story goes, apparently struggling to make it financially as a singer, and to take his mind off his money worries, he went to go to the movies. The film that was showing was Fistful of Dollars. Apparently Peter Tevis only stayed for the opening titles. And what great titles! That kind of rotoscoped style that was supposed to be echoing the Andy Warhol prints that were popular at the time. And of course the music. The music by Ennio Morricone. Peter Tevis was furious, and he marched straight to the studio executives. They owed him something for sure. In the offices of the movie studio, they pretty much knew they'd been caught. They knew that, well, he could prove it. The recording was already there, and it was the same track. So they were in trouble. They opened their checkbooks and said, "What do you want?" And Peter Tevis asked for what any man would ask for. Well, maybe not any man, but certainly what I would ask for. Peter Tevis said he wanted to do a whole album of songs with Ennio Morricone. After the executives probably stopped laughing and put away their checkbook, they agreed. The album didn't do well financially, and Peter Tevis went back to the United States and apparently made novelty animal records. Now, I'm not claiming that Peter Tevis was the unsung hero of that track. Far from it. The maestro Ennio Morricone is the real genius behind the music. And it is genius. Fistful of Dollars is a 10 out of 10 film. It is great. It's one of the classics. As good now as it was when it was made in 1964. Heck, if it was made last year, it would have won Oscars. But it didn't. Because it was made in 1964 and it was seen as trash. One of the things with a lot of the spaghetti westerns was they were made fast and they were made cheap. But the thing is they were still made by really, truly brilliant artists. And within those films, they had more character and charm, more intrigue, more excitement than so much of what comes out of the Hollywood machine today. Fistful of Dollars is a truly great film that made stars out of just about everyone who was in it. And I thoroughly recommend. Well, if you've enjoyed this video and got something from it, why not give back? Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. It doesn't cost you a thing and it helps me out. And if you're a fan of westerns, perhaps you could check out my record, Frontera USA. The link is in the description to the Bandcamp and the Spotify, where you could listen to it. A western-inspired album. I don't have a Patreon account, so it's a way of being able to support this channel too. Check it out. And I'll see you further on down the trail.